Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. It feels like forever since we've done one of these. But welcome, everyone. This is our third in the series of Corsairs of Umbar preview streams. Last week, we showed off where we're at right now, actually. Outer Gondor. The week prior, we did the western half of King's Gondor. And today, we're going to dive into probably one of the newest biomes that we've had in a very, very long time, the Shield Isles. You know, we've never gone tropical in Lord of the Rings Online, and the Shield Isles represents the most tropical we have ever been. So that's really exciting for us. Before I dive into that, I just want to let everyone know that this is a world design focused stream if you haven't been here before. And that means that I'll be answering questions regarding world design, level design, how we go about building the landscapes of Middle Earth. I'm not going to be answering questions about game systems or specifically about content. I'm not the right person to answer those questions. So if you do have questions about things like, the Mariner or PvMP or, what we're doing with mounted combat, for example, those are all questions that are better suited to a different stream with people that are better able to answer those questions than I am. Also, I tend to go long when I'm talking. So if you haven't seen me have a drink in a while, please let me know. I've got my trusty ginger ale hanging out here next to me along with some water. So if I haven't had a drink in a while, chime in on chat and let me know. So for those of you who were here last week, we kind of left things off here kind of at the cliffhanger. We previewed a little bit of what the Dockmaster has in store with some of the destinations, and we'll pop in here. We're introducing the boat network for King's Gondor, so that you can go between Dol Amroth and Pelargir as well. And as you can see here, we have two listings, one for Halrax, which is in the Shield Isles, which is where we'll be going shortly, and then one is for Umbar Bahar Bel, which is the city of Umbar, the city of the Corsairs. We're not going there yet. We're going there next week. But for now, we're going to jump into the Shield Isles. And we're not going to start in Halrax. Halrax is the major hub for the Shield Isles, and we'll get there eventually as we're moving around. But we're going to start you out where most players are likely to have their first experience in the Shield Isles. I'm going to do what I can to avoid any story spoilers as part of this, especially because I do not want Maid of Lions to just come barging into my house and kill the stream as I'm doing this stream. But there will be a story that takes you to the Shield Isles, and one of the places that you start in is off the northern coast of it. So to head there, we'll start. Let me get the right teleport location queued up. All right. Ignore the placeholder loading screens. You'll see another thing too that I've added to the stream here. It's somewhat faint. You can't really see it up top, at least when the loading screen is active. But this is an in development build. So the Shield Isles and Umbar are not as far along as the other two regions are, in large part because it's a lot of new assets that we have not really used all that much before, or at all, as you can see here with these wonderful palm trees all over the place. So we're still working on these spaces more actively than we're working on places like King's Gondor and Outer Gondor. So just as an awareness, this is in development. And we are making leaps and strides every day with new things that we're adding, new work they're doing. In fact, today I'm working not too far in this area from right now, adding things like water flow and sea foam and crashing waves into the landscape around here to kind of make the ocean feel a little bit more alive. So before I get started, there's a lot of chat going on, so I'm going to try to hit a couple of questions, then we'll start running around here. I also have to get myself into casual run speed mode, which is, there we go, run 2.0. That's exactly what we want. So Lotro Mard says, I have only one question. Will we see an expansion of the Middle Earth with Corsairs of Umbar expansion? And technically, yes. So we are moving further south on the map than we ever have been before. We're going to need to make updates to our world maps to reflect this. We need to make updates to the staple collection panel to reflect this. And we need whole cloth maps, just maps in general to build all of this. So Middle Earth is growing as we're going here. We're getting into areas that are a little bit less heavily defined in relation to what has been built by Tolkien himself. So we get a little bit more opportunity to tell new and fresh stories with new adversaries. Not completely whole cloth made up from scratch. There's definitely a lot of inspiration available to us through the source materials to build these things. But it is certainly less trodden territory than anywhere else we've been before. Doomy92 says, Shield Isles is not Umbar City, right? I read it's supposed to be the capital of the King's Men, aka Black Númenóreans and Umbar tribespeople. No, the Shield Isles is a little archipelago off the coast of Umbar. And it is kind of the first stop into these regions that players get if they're following the storyline. We actually had a conversation last week in regards to how we're going to best provide players access to the areas without kind of requiring them to have to go through the storyline. We certainly want everyone to participate in the storyline, but I think there is certainly a necessity to allow players to visit areas without also needing to be a part of the epic story to do so. So we have a good solution for that, I think, with how we've set up our boat travel. While I do want to point out, too, that a lot of this area, you're going to be swimming a bit. You're going to be going between islands. There may be some spots where you can kind of wade your horse through, but a lot of the gaps between islands, you're going to find yourself needing to swim in order to get around them. So I will say, too, like this area, I have not had a lot of direct experience working with. Like the work I was doing today is some of the first work that I've been doing in it. I've done some work on the towns and whatnot, but the overall landscape I haven't really worked on too much. So this will be an opportunity for all of us to explore the Shield Isles. So as you can see here, we're in an in development build. Normally, you would be able to see the rocks here in the far terrain, and that's something else that we're going to be working on over the next couple of weeks, and making sure that by the time this is ready to go to Boror, the major like artifacts that we're seeing as we're working on things are resolved as well as we can make them. So here we are in the Shield Isles. Like I said, it's a little archipelago of islands. And I'm going to keep messing that word up over the course of the stream. Maybe I should just say chain. And it's an island chain. There we go. An island chain. So Snopsnake GR says, are the Shield Isles somewhere mentioned in the lore, or is this something exclusively for the LOTRO game? I'm pretty sure this is a whole cloth creation for Lord of the Rings. I think we wanted to be able to hit on kind of a maritime concept, while we were working on this expansion pack, and having this chain of kind of tropical castaway islands, scratched that Corsair Mariner theming itch. It felt like something that we wanted to do without question, and we just needed to come up with a way to do it. Hirok04 asks, is there a map available already? The maps for these areas are not checked in yet. They actually just went over to our UI person to rough in. Usually our map process starts out with a high level, very placeholdery kind of map, which is basically just the raw radar with some markup so that our UI artist knows what to do and where to do. And then as we get closer to launch, we'll send him more final versions of what our landscape maps look like, and he can then add the final touches that needs to be added. This is an island that I was working on earlier today too. I added a bunch of rocks around it and added some waves crashing along the shore. I don't want to go over there because one, that's a long swim. I could probably rocket jump over there, but we'll save that for later. Question, is King's Gondor open before or after the Battle of the Ring? Like I say, I'm level 120, I leave Rohan and arrive in Gondor. Will it be open or closed off if it's during the Battle of the Ring? So King's Gondor, so all of our regions are kind of time locked, though we do not, with some exception, we do not typically impede your movement between regions if you haven't finished the story for those areas yet. So the way King's Gondor works is you play through original Gondor, and then at some point over the course of the story, you transition from being in the Gondor region to the post-Pelennor region, which is a version of Gondor that occurs after the Battle of Pelennor Fields. And there are a few spots here and there where you can kind of flip back and forth between them as you need to, just for the purposes of access and moving around the game world. King's Gondor is an extension of that post-Pelennor experience, that post-Pelennor Gondor. So if you go to after battle Minas Tirith, you can travel south into Eastern King's Gondor, and then from Eastern King's Gondor, you can continue on west to Western King's Gondor. Currently in the live game, the access to those areas ends at Linhir, so the gates at Linhir are all closed. So you can't get into King's Gondor West on live. But once the expansion pack goes live, you'll be able to go just to physically walk right in there. All right, so now we're in Kafagura. So this is a first, and I need to update the appearances of here. But this is actually a friendly orc village. I mean, friendly is probably not the right word, but it is a village that acts as a hub, full of orcs and goblins that will not slaughter you on sight. I believe the conceit here is they themselves are castaways and refugees, and they are seeking to kind of build their own place in the world, especially now that they're free from the reign of Sauron. This is an idea that we've kind of been kicking around for a little while, even a little bit. We touched on it a little bit as part of Legacy of Durin storyline, with orcs trying to just figure out what society means to them now in a post Sauron world. Are they evil just because they're evil? Are they evil because of his influences? If they're trying to exist in this world around everything else, how can they do so without their existence being at risk? And meanwhile, we have here another dockmaster. We'll go to, I think Marnafra might be a good place to visit. We'll go there. We'll go down through some questions before we do a tour of Marnafra. Let's see what we got here. Is it possible to swim to the Shield Isles from mainland, or is it only accessible by ship boat? Says Growler. And Shield Isles is only accessible via ship, via the dockmasters, or if you have a piece of content that transports you there. Simic 1990 asks, will Mariners get a few new ports for Umbar? I believe they will. That's more of a question for our game systems folk to answer than for me to answer. But there are certainly places that they could use, that could be used by that class for their destinations. Aunar asks, what level is this stuff? Is there a level cap increase in this expansion? Yes, there is. The level cap is going to be up to 150 now. And most of the stuff in the Shield Isles area, I think, is going to be mid-late 140s. I think it starts around like 145, 146 maybe. I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. Now that I've said that, you're all going to quote me on that. Dan the Man asks, you may not be the one to ask, but can we expect in the future perhaps a new yearly festivals type specific to this region and culture? So I don't know specifically about this region and culture. I do know that, excuse me, Orion in particular is very interested in introducing more events. He started that working on the crafting events, for example, and will be hoping to expand that. And then as far as other events go, like I think if there's interest for it and in it, then we'll make it happen. Question everyone wants to know, how many islands? Lots and lots of islands. There are very many islands. I don't know the exact count off the top of my head, but there's a lot of them. So Mar Nafra is where you'll kind of get your first taste of some of the new buildings that we're introducing as part of this expansion pack. The city of Umbar, of course, takes a lot of this and just blows it all out. It's crazy how complex our other world designers have like how complex they've made that city. It's a great city. It feels, I think we've done complex cities before, but this definitely, with the new kinds of assets and the new setting, it's definitely got a very different feel to it than what we've built before. What will happen if a player swims too far out into sea? So right now, our current plan is, kind of continuing on with what we've done in the Bay of Belphalis, where we'll have that layer of damaging water, and then we'll have a layer of just smite you water. I think we want to try to have it be flavored for the region, but that may or may not be able to happen in time for launch. So at the very least, there will be a point where you are just defeated once you've gone so far out. Boat mount, when? Not in the near future. It's something that we had talked about for this area, but not something that I think is going to be very viable for us to produce at the moment. And especially too, like we are going very heavy on the Mariner and on Corsairs right now. But really, once we arrive at Umbar, that kind of announces a change in geographical direction. Like, we're invested here on the coast, and then as we complete the story of the expansion pack, we're going to start looking inwards towards inland, towards Haradwaith. Do asks, question, I like watching the old LOTRO videos you guys did from 07 to 2016. Do you still use the old world building tool, or is there a new one you use now? We're currently still using the same tool. It's had revisions upon revisions since then, but it's the same tools that we've had and that we've always been using. We have been layering in additional methods and processes as well. Like I've talked a little bit about how I use a tool called World Machine to help do initial height map passes on everything. So, there are certainly ways that we have kind of extended beyond our original tool set. Oh, that's too steep to get out. Where am I going to get out? Here's where I'm going to get out. So we've definitely extended beyond that in certain places, but I don't think we haven't moved to any new tool sets specifically for building stuff. Um, let's see. Who inhabits the Shield Isles? Haradrim, Corsairs. I think it's a little bit everyone. There's mostly Corsairs, but like we saw before, there are the Orc castaways and the Goblin castaways. There are some Haradrim, I believe, that are here as well that have shipwrecked on the island. Like this seems to be kind of a fateful place. You don't necessarily want to come here, at least if you're not from the area, but you find yourself here, or at least the ocean finds you finding your way here, if that makes sense. Let's see. You mentioned last week that you had a meeting coming up about the space for the new raid. Any hints or teases that you can give us about that space? Nothing that I am ready to talk about yet. We have some conversations. We're changing some ideas here and there. We're seeing what like fits and works best for what we want to build in those spaces. We have a high level idea. My plan is to I'll start working on actually building the physical space sometime within the next week or so, and hopefully it'll be able to move into development pretty quickly. Softsnake GR says there's the huge island called Tolfalos. Why'd you skip it? Wouldn't there be a good opportunity for mariners to exist there as well? Honestly, it was skipped because it wasn't part of our story plan. Our whole aim and drive through the story was to kind of wrap up the stories we wanted to tell in Gondor, and then move on and into the lands of the Shield Isles and Umbar. And Tolfalos was not something that was like on our agenda. It was not something that we were really feeling like we needed to hit. Now that just means that there are opportunities for it in the future because of that. Lost Shire Hobbit says, is Scenario about to freak out with the emergency alert? I turned off my phone intentionally because of all of the warnings of that coming up. I did not need to be fumbling around on live stream with a klaxon firing off while showing you all this wonderful island, or these wonderful islands. So much island water, and yet we can't dive in this nice water. Will it be possible sometime? We don't have any specific plans for underwater swimming at this point. It was stuff we talked a little bit about it at the very beginning, and it felt like kind of a non-starter considering the way our water currently works, and what would need to be done in order to make it feel good and feel like appropriate for everything. Of course, I'm going north. Don't mind me as I run in circles. That's where I want to go. So as you can tell, I'm not very familiar with this area, because I just ran in a circle. Go me. I shouldn't have turned off my radar. I always imagined the southern cultures, Umbar and Harad, to be Tolkien's idea of what preceded the African Sicilian portion of the Mediterranean. This is giving me those vibes thus far, from BR. And it's like I think that was the start of the intent, but we also know that the world that Tolkien lived in, the time that he lived in, is a different world than what is now there and what we understand of the world. So we wanted to be very careful as we were building things to not to evoke a sense of things without leaning too heavily into kind of real world stereotypes. We want to make sure that what we're building is respectful and is not too heavily influenced by any one specific culture. More thinking of it in terms of a general vibe, a feel that we're going for in these regions. Um, Do asks, I remember seeing an Umbar ship in the river outside of Tharbad City, though it is really hard to see. Is that an Easter egg you put in? That is an Easter egg that I put in um, back at the construction of Before the Shadow, because we kind of had a sense of what we were going to do for the story in Angmar Reborn. And there are some ties between what's going on in Angmar Reborn and what's happening in this expansion pack. Um, let's see. Behind the scenes, do you all still call each other by your Lotro moniker or by actual birth name? Oh, we're all on the first name basis here. Um, I think it's sometimes easier for us when we are. Let me get myself up to a proper height so I can see where everything is. It's sometimes easier for us to, when we're talking publicly like this, to refer to other members on the team by their message board monikers. In some part because that's how the players are most familiar with them, and in some part because some people may choose to interact with the community, but they're not comfortable with their names or their faces being out there. Orion, I don't think really has that concern, but other members of the team may have that concern, and it's important to be kind of respectful of them, so we don't want to step on any toes or upset other people by calling them by their names in a live stream if we can avoid it. It's just easier to use the forum names as a shorthand so that people will know who we're talking about without us, going too specific or using names that people may not want to have used. Let's see. Can we get housing in the Isles in the future? Um, so I think that's one of the things that we've. Hey, Toad, you're just bouncing along there. Oh, hi. So will we get housing on the Isles in the future? I think that's something that there's certainly an appeal. I actually one of the hubs that I finished building a couple days ago, I shared a screenshot from the team or to the team, and a couple of people are like, I want a house there, or I want that to be my house. I think there is a system concept that Orion and I are working on that I think would be well suited for island housing, but it's not something that is immediately on our radar. What is your favorite part of the expansion scenario? Honestly, I think the towns are going to be my favorite part. They're just it's new shape forms, a new kind of culture, just new in general. It feels great. So this town, for example, is looking a little barren right now. The build that we're running on is a couple of days old and does not incorporate a lot of the town color or any of the town color that has since been placed here. But all the town services exist here. But yeah, I think the towns are going to be my favorite spots. Umbar itself, the city looks gorgeous. There are a couple of oceanside citadels on the Cape as well that have just a really cool feel to them. And then these villages here that like Halrax and Marnafra, just they feel great to me. They are just different and distinct, and they're not something that we've really seen or experienced in Lotro before. And I think that's where I find the most excitement. I think what I produced as part of working on Outer Gondor looks good, but I think this stuff here is the these towns are really are really the masterpieces and the centerpieces for everything. Let's see, as we scroll down, is the landmass in, so Darwin asks, is the landmass in Update 38 larger than what was built for the Gundabad expansion? Yes, there is more physical landmass in this update than there was in Gundabad. And I think there's, if not more, very close to, it's a similar amount to what was available in Before the Shadow as well. I think when we made Before the Shadow, I kind of touted that as, the biggest single landscape edition we'd ever done, and then we just went ahead the following year and decided to make something bigger. Go us. Do asks, I love picking the White Mountains as my location for my dwarf. Will my dwarf be able to go home? Is there a big city in the White Mountains for this expansion pack? There is no big city for White Mountain for the dwarves of the White Mountains. There is Farouk Zahar, which is a fortress in the White Mountains, and it has dwarves in it. But we are not really expanding on dwarves much further than that. They have that presence there in Farouk Zahar, and they have a little bit of a presence. Different clan of dwarves has a little bit of a presence in the city of Umbar. But outside of that, dwarves were kind of putting on pause for right now. Let's see. So BR asks, is naming the villages and areas part of your process? What inspired these names? So the names are generally inspired by the research that we do. Oh, you can see here. You can see off in the distance. I believe that is Umbar down there. That is the Cape of Umbar that you can see in the very, very far distance. There are a lot of people in here asking for pictures of maps. The maps are not hooked up yet, so I can't show you the maps. So back to the naming thing. When we do our initial research, our lore master goes through, researches the heck out of everything, finds the language inspirations, the cultural inspirations, finds what names he can for locations, and then uses all of that information to kind of expand upon things and to grow what is available as far as names and whatnot. And usually the names have a translatable background to them in some way. Where is... Oh, don't mind me as I sink into physics. So let's see, we'll scroll down, see if I can catch up on things. So everyone seems excited about the slate tiles. Is there an interior you can show us? So there are no real interiors here on the shield isles. There will be some interiors scattered throughout Umbar itself. And we may try to get some interiors of opportunity in, depending on how much time we have, what the oh, okay, yeah, so this is an older build. Was a village here at one point, but once that build is available, as you can see, we can go back to Hellrax if we want. Yeah, this is a little bit older because there's no access to the quest hubs on Umbar yet. Thank you for the hydration check. All right. So Do asks, any plans for 2024 for new filler zones? Maybe South Farthing, Middle Mirkwood, Brownlands, or Grey Havens. Um, so we've got a plan, or I have a plan. I have a document underway, and my intention is to start working on that um, once I'm done working on this. But we haven't confirmed whether or not that's what we want to do. So right now it's all just documentation. Once we're past the documentation point, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about it potentially. But we'll just something spawned. There you are. You're a sneaky hill beast. Um, once we're a bit further along, but the plan is like we know those areas were popular, and they certainly helped to the uh, expand the replayability of the game, and it's certainly something that I'm interested in continuing to do. I think the next area that we need to build needs to cover, that Moria space, whether it's somewhere in the 50 to 60 range, whether it's exactly 50 to 60 or if it's something like 53 to 57, something like that. It needs to fall in that level range in order to really be helpful and be of service to the game. And then that's likely to mean that area is going to be still in area door, and I have a couple of spots in mind that would fill that, scratch that itch fairly well. Will there be any instance spaces on the shield isles? I know there are story instances that are happening here, but as far as like in-game repeatable instances, we're leaning more into the city of Umbar for those spaces. I know there are a couple of instances that are going to be happening on the actual like landscape of the city, so you will be able to take part in instances there. And then there are a few spaces that are kind of linked to the city, but not something that you can access normally in the city. Certain types of interiors and whatnot. Mandalayer says the next area you need to build needs to be premium elven housing, Coughs in Sindarin. Yes, that is I think where we should go next, but there is certainly seeing the assets here in the Shield Isles and in Umbar, there's certainly a strong argument to be made for Umbar housing. I even have an idea in mind for that as well. But I do think it's important to make sure that, at least for the premium neighborhoods, that we have kind of like each origin has a like a premium offering. So Naughty Lulu says the area between Angmar and Forkel. Maybe not. My ideas. I've gotten ideas. I've made my pitch. Again, my constant co-conspirator Orion and I have been talking a bit back and forth about what could go where. So we'll pop back into Halifax. I think there were a couple of people that were asking to see the village a little bit more up close. I wish that this was a more finished version of the town. I know there were some build challenges this morning, kind of getting everything set up. So, but you can certainly come here. This is certainly setting people up for a like very very large difference when they come here as part of previews, as part of Bull Roar. So. Do asks, question, it's a follow-up. I was doing the dwarf elf prologue and the NPC mentioned that they were taking this elf to the northern port of Arid Luin. Is there a story to tell or more dour hands next to Foreshell? Do you think that there could be that could be a new land? So yeah, we actually, or I've been calling that area kind of between Ered Luin and the the southwestern areas of. Let me slow down my run speed a little bit. The southwestern areas of Forshell as the Lunan Vale. And there's a lot of space between there and Foreshell, which could be developed into something as well. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's still a lot of space left in Eriador to fill in that, get in that Moria alternative. Let's see. So no Farharad after this, like an actual desert. So we can talk more about that next week when we actually start looking at the Cape of Umbar. But the way the landscape works is the in the maps, in the like source material, is there is the Cape, and then beyond the Cape are the kind of arid lands, the savannas, the deserts that comprise Harad. And that's where we'll eventually be going to continue the story. And we have a lot of space to do it. Lost Shire Hobbit says, reminds me of towns in Italy that are by the sea. Was that the plan? I think so. It's actually it's kind of funny that that's mentioned, because we had the designer who built who's building Umbar right now. He actually went on a trip to Italy with his family earlier in the year and came back with tons of reference photos. And then another, one of our artists did the same. And she came back, and we were doing an art review of Umbar yesterday. She came back and was just really like kind of amazed at how the things that she had seen on that trip to southern Italy were kind of reflected in some of the spaces that were built here, particularly the older spaces, the older buildings. Sam Burke says, now I got in the mood to see Cutthroat Island 1995 again, starring Gina Davis. See, for me, running around in here makes me think of, was it Marigold Bay, in which, I think there were a lot of older Disney films and whatnot that were set in those in St. Lucia. I forget what one it was, but the plaster painted houses, brightly colored and whatnot, that was very like specific to those areas. And this kind of reminds me a lot of that, like taking a boat past the village and seeing it. Yeah, I think it was Marigold Bay. Dan the Man says, hey Scenario, how about more areas with vertical descending caves that are open with no load screen, like the Worm Cave in Eastern Mitsu Mountains and the Tavern underneath Thorns Hall? So those areas are certainly things that we can do. Often we do them when we have the actual physical room and ability to do it. Oftentimes when we do require a teleport, it's usually because building the space in an interior with a teleport transition is easier than trying to build that space on landscape and have the contiguous connection feel good. Because the dual height map system that we used in Moria to build all of Moria is a great system, but it doesn't always play particularly well when butted up against non-dual height map space. You get kind of weird artifacts that can occur because of that. Druid's Fire says, it feels like what I expected based on previous iterations of the lore, where it was overlaid with Europe and the Mediterranean. Are there crocodiles here? I don't think there are any crocodiles in our mixed spawns here. Those are, we've kind of saved more for Umbar. And let's see, how much of the new Umbar build set will be made available as housing items? So we're not going crazy on new housing items for this update. There are definitely going to be new housing items, and there are a lot of items of opportunity, but we're not going to have a set that is as robust as we have been doing over the last couple of years with other major housing releases. My plan is to have things like day files, have a set of floor and wall surfaces, and they're supported decorative floors and walls. Have some additional like small deco of opportunity, things like staircases. We're going to introduce more vines as a set, including a vine wall, and some NPCs as well. So like Ambari flavored auctioneers or bankers, the things that we have NPCs for, but doing Umbar flavored versions of those, as well as a couple of new fences to go in Lindleby housing right now, and eventually other housing as we retrofit. Do asks, in Buckland there is a big box garden wedge and it's empty. When the game was being made, was that to be Hobbit housing? Do you think that we could use that for Hobbit housing in Buckland? That was actually going to be another little village, and we walled it off at that time for the purposes of saving time, basically. We were building fast and had a tight deadline, and we had to make some decisions about what would stay, what would go, what would get cut. And that little village was kind of like on the cusp. It wasn't really serving any of our needs, and so we kind of just like walled it off, and it's been like that ever since. Let's see. Any more questions? Okay. Bright Life Community says, 1, love the zone. 2, the wood burning stove looks cozy. It is, and it has been very helpful in the mornings when we get up in the morning and I get ready to start work, and it is 40 degrees outside. It has been very, very helpful, especially because this office, the windows currently are just normal storm windows, so it's going to get chilly in here in the winter. Let's see, going down through some more questions. What class do you plan to take through the new expansion first? Mariner? I actually when Before the Shadow came out, I planned to play a brawler, and got started on it a little bit and then did not get super far, just because work and life and so many other games. This is honestly my favorite new texture. This is my favorite new texture in the game. I would use it everywhere, but then people would probably be like, why are you using this puddle texture everywhere? So let's go up here and we'll see if we've got a few more questions. So I know, I'm actually surprisingly running a little bit fast on this. We have not seen everything on the islands, but as you saw earlier, I ran in a circle. So I might just hang out here for a little bit and answer the questions that you guys have. Hey, kitty. We got cats everywhere. We got this dude who's working hard, moving. Probably is nothing in there right now, but I'm sure he's probably just crossfitting. That's what he's doing. But he doesn't talk a lot about it. All right. Let's see. So Rihanna says, "Hi, this all looks amazing. This is a high-level zone, right?" Yes, this is. This is one of the new zones for the expansion pack. It is a late 140s zone, late 140s region. Will the Corsairs of Umbar have 2150 level missions so non-endgame players can visit these new areas? I'm not sure what accessibility these missions will have. The missions will have as part of it. That's not something that I can really specifically answer. I'm not the designer behind the missions. Often one of the nice things about missions is they are often a I mentioned this a little bit, but it's a moment of opportunity where like a designer will a designer will get an idea, and if the space is already built, like one of the big goals with missions after we introduced them in like Elder Slate and Gundabad was that going forward, trying to leverage landscape and existing spaces as much as possible. In making them so that they can really be, quick creations. Um, that's a good view. We'll hang out here. Let's see. Any hidden treasures behind waterfalls? Every time we make a region that has waterfalls, there is always a designer that wants to put something behind a waterfall. And more often than not, we don't actually design waterfalls to have stuff hidden behind them. Mostly because the waterfall assets really aren't great for going behind. Um, Very important question. Will there be a hidden giant cave claw in Umbar? I mean, there are all sorts of mysterious things in Umbar that players have not seen yet. So who knows? There may be. Um, let's see. Is it possible to climb on top of that rock arch? I don't think it is currently, anyways. Let's wander our way up here. And you can get close to it, but I don't think you can climb up on it. Is the playable space in the Shield Isles larger than what is accessible in the region around Umbar? I think Umbar is easily larger than the Shield Isles. I think one of the things that, yeah, there's no way up on it. You can get close. You can. We'll call this Dwayne Jr. No, we won't call anyone Dwayne anymore. But now I'm up on it. Yeah, so Ivanar says, tiny little islands and we still have these cliffs with massive waterfalls. Must be some serious rain in these regions. Yeah, I mean, there's the gaminess of it. Sometimes you just need to build things that look cool to evoke a feel. So here we are at nighttime. So one thing to note too is, let's go back to daytime for a second real quick. It is a cloudy day, so that's not helpful. But there will be, as part of the day files in these regions, whole new, brand new clouds, new cloud assets. So we're getting brand new clouds for the region, which is really exciting. We haven't had those, I think, since the original Gondor. Do asks, will there be any hints to the blue wizards in the east? It would be cool if we could find one and he's hiding in Umbar. It will be a new story in the expansion pack. We don't have any current plans for the blue wizards. And even if we did, I wouldn't speak on it too specifically just to avoid spoilers. Norbert asks, would it be possible to replace the distant imposters with actual trees, or is it a high performance cost? So the imposters exist outside of loaded space, and that's for gameplay performance. If there was a way for us to expand the number of land blocks that could be loaded, then those trees that were in the distance could potentially be non-imposters. But imposters are kind of a necessary evil for the performance of a space, because trees, especially when you have, you see off in the distance there, that full looking forest of space, like that can get very expensive very quickly, especially with the detail that some of these trees have up close. Nanarnus says, can we get texture on the water? Seems in need of it here. That's one of the things earlier in the stream I had mentioned that I'm working on, going through the Shield Isles right now and adding some. We were talking about too, like what we could do to maybe use a water type that's different from the dynamic water type that we currently have here. Um, but we would want it to be able to use the seafoam layer as well. So there's a small like technical hurdle there because it's a very different water system. But what I'm doing right now is I am going through and just painting a little bit of water flow to add a little bit of noise to the landscape as you, or noise to the water as you go through. Um, let's see. What was the trickiest part of building the landscape for update 38? I mean, for me, it was figuring out how the rivers work in Outer Gondor because of story needs for boats to go up and down them. That was the trickiest one because I had built the landscape, and then our content team was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! We need a ship that can go up and down this." So I had to kind of like step back and rethink the topology of the landscape. And when I say built the landscape, I mean just the landscape. No scene files, no rocks. I had just the mesh. So I had to go back and kind of figure that out again. As to these other areas, I'm not sure exactly where the other designers that were building these landscapes felt that their challenge points were. Certainly, like, I think figuring out a way to make these islands work and to build them, because this is very much a type of landscape that we never built before, is a challenge. But uh, yeah, I can't speak with specificity. Um, are there any other plans? Are there any plans for better optimization or better utilization of good hardware? Not a question I can answer. That's something that our engineering team would have to have their brain picked on, or something that you could talk to um, Severlin about if he joins in on a stream, like on a Friday stream with Cordovan. So that would be the person you would have to talk to about those things. Um, what region would you like to see the most in game but is not in yet? I'll be honest. I don't have that much. I don't have a region right now that I think of and go like, boy, I wish that was in there. For me, the longest time, the Yonder Shire was the like, I wish this was in here region, because it represented a gap in our open world. Um, but yeah, like I'd have to actually sit down and think about what regions I would want to build to fit in. Um, Mike Elias says, didn't Even Dim have some pretty rough waters, or is it the same? So the Lake Even Dim, the lake itself uses a water type that is different from the kind of water that we're using here. It's not the same kind of water that you can use to make the like accurate flowing paths of water through things. And that's where the challenges is, because it's a different kind of water. It doesn't have the same sorts of features that our dynamic flow water has. And so we would need to find a way to make it work so that we could have that kind of choppier, static water that also supports things like the foam layer. All right, I'll answer a couple more questions and then we'll wrap things up. Darwin says, are dockmasters along the Anduin something you've considered? Certainly something we've considered. Have not put it as a priority for us at the moment. We do have the whole run of the Anduin now in game, and it would certainly be something that we could make happen. But like I said, it's not something that we're really prioritizing at the moment. It may be something like that may be a great task for, particularly for someone new who's coming onto the project to kind of learn how things work. Since boat travel is a very simple travel system in comparison to stable travel. Alex Mers says, do you think there might be a possibility of us visiting Numenor like in a flashback? I don't want to rule things out, but I also want to say that's not where we're thinking on right now as far as the direction that we're going with the game. I am not going to try to pronounce that. Asks, a question only tangentially related to the new expansion. Is it possible to add a shimmer effect to the starry skyboxes in game? would make the stars seem more real. I think that would be a possibility. And if an artist wanted to take that up, they could certainly try it out. And we'll do two last questions, and then we'll wrap things up. Imagor says, how many locations here in the Shield Isles? So there are 3 main islands in the Shield Isles, and then many smaller islands connecting them all together. Dan the Man asks, does SSG have the rights to the Blue Wizards? I know they're in the Silmarillion. I think it's like other things where we have kind of dipped into stuff that is not specifically in Lord of the Rings. We have to find a way to make it work within what we have access to. Like, we know there are 5 wizards, I think, as part of Lord of the Rings, but we don't really know their names or what happened to them or any of that stuff. So anything we do has to be SSG Lord of the Rings flavored. Kind of like how Sauron in the Ringforge was a different name than he is in the Silmarillion because we didn't have access to that sort of thing. And then one last question. Do asks, the other half of Mordor that we can't get to, will that be an expansion pack or filler zone? I honestly can't answer that with any sort of certainty. It makes sense to make that an expansion. It makes sense to make that a filler zone. It's something that we can only really determine when we get to the point of opportunity for building those things. But anyways, it is just a little bit past our time here. So thank you everyone for joining me on this stroll through the Shield Isles. Next week, we'll be starting off on the Cape of Umbar in the village of Jacksfanal, and then making our way along the coast of the Cape and eventually arriving in the city of Umbar. So thank you everyone for being here this week, and I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you have not had a chance to get yourself a Mariner or play with people who are playing with Mariners, those are live now, so you can hop into the game and play with them. In the meantime, I hope you all have a great afternoon and a great remainder of your week. And we'll see you this time next week for the last preview stream, the City of Umbar and the Cape of Umbar. So thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.